Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start today with a simple question. Why are we so afraid to fail? We grow up being told that failure is something to avoid, that it's shameful, that it defines our worth. We're told to chase success, to get the grades, to land the job, to build the perfect life, but no one teaches us how to fall. No one teaches us how to get back up, and yet, every great story of success begins with failure. Think about it, every innovator, every leader, every hero we admire. They all failed not once, but repeatedly, and the reason we admire them isn't because they were perfect. It's because they kept going. Let me tell you a story. When Thomas Edison was creating the light bulb, he failed over 1,000 times. Someone once asked him, how did it feel to fail 1,000 times? And he said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps. That's not just optimism, that's purpose, that's perspective, and that's the lesson. Failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of it. You see, we fear failure because we believe it says something about who we are. That if we fail, we're not good enough, that we'll be judged, that we'll disappoint people. But here's the truth, failure doesn't define you. Your response to failure does. I talk a lot about the power of why. When we know our why, our purpose, failure doesn't shake us the same way. Because the goal isn't just to succeed, the goal is to matter. The goal is to keep going when it's hard, when it's uncertain, when things fall apart. So the real question isn't, what if I fail? The real question is, what if I never try? Because fear might protect us from short-term discomfort, but it also robs us of long-term fulfillment. I met a young entrepreneur once who had a brilliant idea but was terrified to launch. She said, what if no one buys it? And I asked her, what if someone does? What if your idea helps one person? Would it be worth it? She paused and said, yes. And that's the point. If we can help even one person, if we can make one thing better, if we can take one step closer to becoming who we're meant to be, then isn't that worth the risk? Now, I'm not saying we should chase failure. I'm saying we should stop fearing it, because the cost of never trying is far greater than the cost of falling. So if you have a dream, if you have an idea, if you feel that fire inside you start, even if you stumble, even if it's messy, even if you fail, because failure means you tried. Failure means you're learning. Failure means you're alive. And one more thing, the people who change the world, they're not the ones who never fail. They're the ones who never give up. So don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid of waking up one day and realizing you let fear write your story. Choose courage, choose growth, choose purpose, that if you fail, you're not succeeding. And if you're succeeding, you must not be failing, but real life, especially the life of anyone who's ever created something meaningful, tells a different story. Success isn't a clean upward slope, it's jagged, messy, full of mistakes, missteps, and yes, failures. Think about the people we admire, the inventors, the artists, the entrepreneurs. They aren't defined by an absence of failure. They're defined by their relationship to it. Thomas Edison didn't see failure as defeat. He saw it as data. Every misstep was information, a necessary part of getting it right. That mindset is critical, because when we view failure as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block, it empowers us. It gives us permission to act. It makes the process less about perfection and more about progress. This shift in thinking doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we change the story we tell ourselves. If you believe failure is a sign that you're not good enough, then of course you'll avoid it. But if you believe failure is evidence that you're trying, that you're learning, evolving, and daring to stretch beyond your comfort zone, then failure becomes something to value, not fear. It also helps us develop resilience. The people who can bounce back from failure faster aren't necessarily more talented or more intelligent. They've simply trained themselves to see failure differently. They expect it. They understand it's inevitable on the road to doing anything significant. And because of that, they don't waste time judging themselves when it happens. They adjust, adapt, and move forward. More importantly, embracing failure invites authenticity into our journey. So much of our fear of failure is rooted in how we think others will perceive us. We want to look competent. We want to look strong. But what truly connects us to others isn't our perfection. It's our vulnerability. When we own our failures, when we talk about them honestly, We give others permission to do the same. We create a culture where it's safe to take risks, to experiment, to stretch beyond what we already know. And isn't that what leadership is about? Creating environments where people can grow, not in spite of failure, but because of it. Failure is not a dead end. It's not a judgment. It's a process. It's part of the journey, not an interruption of it. When we can truly internalize that, when we stop resisting failure and start learning from it, everything changes. We become bolder. We move with clarity. We act not out of fear, but out of purpose. And in doing so, we discover that success was never about avoiding failure. It was about walking through it, again and again, until we arrive somewhere new, somewhere better, somewhere real. One of the greatest misconceptions we carry is that when we fail, we become a failure. That the outcome of one event has the power to define who we are. But the truth is, failure is an event, not an identity. It is something that happens, not something we become. And the distinction between those two perspectives is the difference between someone who is paralyzed by fear and someone who is propelled by purpose. It's easy to let failure speak too loudly. When something goes wrong, when we launch something and it doesn't work, when we give our best and fall short, it can feel personal. And in that moment, we're tempted to attach meaning to the failure that extends beyond the facts. We say, "I'm not good at this," or worse, "I'm not good enough." But those are stories, not truths. What's true is that you tried something, and it didn't go as planned. That's it. The rest is narrative, and we control that narrative. The most effective leaders, the ones who make an impact, are not the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who take ownership of their response. They pause, reflect, adapt, and move forward. They understand that the fall is inevitable, but the rise is optional, and it's in that decision to rise that character is formed. Your response to failure is the story you choose to tell yourself and others. Do you hide or do you reflect? Do you blame or do you learn? Do you shrink or do you grow? Each response sends a message, not only to yourself but to everyone watching. As leaders, whether of teams, communities, or families, we are always modeling behavior. When we respond to failure with courage and humility, we show others that it's safe to do the same. We create cultures where learning is prioritized over perfection, where risk-taking is encouraged, and where growth is the goal. There's also a deeply human element here. Responding well to failure doesn't mean pretending it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean denying disappointment or frustration. It means acknowledging the emotion but not letting it dictate the outcome. It means standing in the mess long enough to make sense of it and then using it as fuel to become better. There is a quiet strength in that kind of resilience. Ultimately, how we respond to failure says more about us than the failure itself ever could. It's where our values show up. It's where our discipline is tested. And it's where our sense of purpose is either rekindled or revealed. We don't need to fear failure. We need to fear not responding to it with intent. So many of us spend our lives avoiding the possibility of failure. We overthink, we hesitate, we wait for the perfect time, the perfect conditions, the perfect certainty. But what we're really doing is choosing safety over courage. We're not avoiding failure. We're avoiding the vulnerability that comes with effort, with commitment, with showing up before we feel ready. And in doing so, we miss the single most dangerous risk of all, the risk of never trying. The truth is, you can fail by not trying just as much as you can fail by trying and falling short. In fact, not trying guarantees a different kind of failure. It's the slow, silent kind. The kind that doesn't show up in dramatic moments, but accumulates over years, in the form of regret, resentment, and unrealized potential. We like to think that inaction keeps us safe, but inaction often keeps us stuck. Fear tells us, what if you fail? But the more powerful question is, what if you don't even try? What opportunities might you miss? What people might you never meet? What impact might you never make? Trying doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees growth, Every time you try, you stretch your capacity, you learn something about yourself, you test the limits of what you thought was possible. Simon Sinek often talks about the importance of purpose, of knowing your why. And when you're deeply connected to your why, the fear of failure starts to fade. Not because it disappears, but because your mission becomes more important than your comfort. Purpose gives you a reason to try, even when it's hard, even when you might fall, even when there are no guarantees. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you try, even if you fail, you win. You gain clarity, you learn resilience, you develop courage. These are not small things. These are the foundations of a meaningful life. The people we admire most are not the ones who never fell. They're the ones who tried when it was risky, who moved forward without all the answers, who understood that trying, even in the face of possible failure, is an act of faith. Not just in the outcome, but in themselves. Trying also shifts the narrative. It moves you from being a passive observer in your own life to being an active participant. It moves you from wondering what if, to discovering what now. Every time you try, you cast a vote for the person you want to become. Not the person who played it safe, but the one who stepped forward in courage. So don't let fear trick you into sitting still. Don't let uncertainty rob you of your chance to grow. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more brave ones, and brave people don't wait until they're unafraid. They try anyway. When we think about making a difference, we often imagine it on a grand scale. We think we need to reach millions, to go viral, to change the world overnight. And that belief can become paralyzing. It convinces us that if we can't do something massive, then maybe it's not worth doing at all. But real impact rarely begins with scale, it begins with sincerity, and sometimes helping just one person is enough to justify every bit of effort, risk, and even failure. There's a profound truth here. Success isn't always measured by numbers, it's measured by meaning. If what you create, share, or attempt to build changes one life, brings clarity to one person, gives hope to someone in pain, or inspires one person to take action, then you've already succeeded. You've already made a difference. And in making a difference for one, you create the foundation to impact many. The pressure to be extraordinary often stops us from even being useful. We compare ourselves to others, we measure our work against impossible benchmarks, and we forget that every ripple effect starts with one stone. Helping one person is not small, it is everything, because that one person might go on to help someone else. That one decision to speak, to act, to show up, creates a chain reaction that we often can't see, but it matters deeply. I once met a young woman who hesitated to share her story because she didn't think it was significant enough. She said, "Who's going to care?" But when she finally did speak, a young man in the audience came up to her afterward and said, "That was exactly what I needed to hear." That moment became the reason she kept going. Not because she suddenly had a huge platform, but because she had proof that her voice mattered to someone. In Simon Sinek's work, the emphasis is always on clarity of purpose over performance. When your reason for doing something is anchored in service, you don't need external validation to keep going. You just need that inner compass reminding you that what you're doing could matter to someone. And that's enough. That's more than enough. You never know who is watching your journey, who's listening to your words, who's being quietly inspired by your willingness to try, to speak, to risk failure in the name of growth. We underestimate the power of presence, of honesty, of simply showing up with something real to offer. So don't hold back because you think it's not big enough. Don't wait until you have it all figured out. If you can help one person, just one, your courage will have been worth it, because to that person, you may be the spark that changes everything. Sometimes, the most revolutionary act isn't trying to change the world. It's trying to change someone's world. There's a subtle but important distinction between embracing failure and glorifying it. We're not saying that failure is something to pursue for its own sake. No one sets out to fail. Rather, we must stop letting the fear of it hold us hostage. The goal isn't to become comfortable with failing. The goal is to become so committed to growth, to purpose, to progress, that failure no longer has the power to paralyze us. When we fear failure, we begin to shrink. We make our goals smaller, our efforts safer, and our voices quieter. We trade bold ideas for predictable routines. We stay inside the lines because coloring outside them might expose us to criticism, rejection, or embarrassment. But what we often forget is that fear of failure doesn't protect us from pain. It simply guarantees we'll live with a different kind of pain, the pain of playing small. We should strive to act, to build, to speak, not because we're fearless, but because our mission matters more than our ego. Fear of failure often stems from a fixation on outcome. We think, what if I try and it doesn't work? What if people see me stumble? But here's a better question. What if I never know what I'm capable of? Every time we let fear stop us, we rob ourselves of the chance to grow. Not just to achieve, but to become, to develop character, resilience, wisdom. One of the most liberating realizations in life is that failure does not break you. It refines you. Failure strips away what's inessential. It forces you to confront what matters. And if you're willing to look closely, you'll find that failure is almost always trying to teach you something. Not about the world, but about yourself, your limits, your values, your ability to endure. Sinek often reminds us that leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. And to lead others well, we must first lead ourselves through discomfort. That includes failure. We must be the ones who walk through it with humility, extract the lesson, and return stronger, not because we like to fail, but because we know that avoiding it costs far more. Think of the people you admire, the great thinkers, the bold leaders, the courageous creators. They don't celebrate failure, but they refuse to be ruled by it. They understand that anything worth doing is going to involve some risk. And they take that risk anyway, not because they're certain, but because they're committed. So no, don't aim to fail, aim to try. Aim to push your limits. Aim to contribute something meaningful. And if failure shows up on the path, acknowledge it, learn from it, and keep moving. Because in the end, fear will only win if we let it dictate our choices. When we look at those who have made a meaningful impact in the world, it's easy to focus on their triumphs, the accolades, the achievements, the polished results. But if you dig deeper, what you'll find isn't a trail of perfection. It's a trail of perseverance. What sets world changers apart is not that they've never fallen. It's that they refuse to stay down. They didn't let failure be the final word. They made it part of the journey. The danger of idolizing success is that it creates a myth of effortlessness. We assume that those at the top got there through talent alone, or that they had a secret advantage the rest of us don't. But more often than not, what they had was grit, discipline, determination. They had the ability to keep showing up even when the results didn't. They kept going when others quit. They endured when the pressure said stop. Resilience is not glamorous, it's not loud, it's not instantly rewarding, but it is the common denominator in every story of long-term impact because setbacks are inevitable. Life is unpredictable. No matter how smart you are, how prepared you are, how talented you are, there will be days when nothing goes as planned. Days when you question everything. Days when failure seems like proof that you're not meant to keep going. And that's where the choice comes in. Do you interpret failure as a stop sign or as a detour? Do you allow the fall to define your future? Or do you decide that the fall is part of the process of becoming who you're meant to be? The answer to those questions determines how far you'll go. Sinek often talks about the concept of the infinite game, the idea that life and leadership are not finite competitions with clear winners and losers, but ongoing journeys where the goal is to stay in the game. The people who truly lead, who truly create change, are those who choose to play the infinite game. They don't stop when they hit an obstacle, they adapt, they reframe, they persist. And persistence isn't about brute force. It's about staying connected to your purpose. When you know why you're doing what you're doing, the how becomes more flexible. You can shift strategies without losing your sense of direction. You can embrace failure as feedback, not defeat. And you can keep moving forward, not because it's easy, but because it matters. Ultimately, changing the world doesn't always look like grand gestures. Sometimes it looks like refusing to give up on your dream, on your team, on yourself. The people who make the biggest difference aren't the ones who got it right the first time. They're the ones who kept trying after everyone else stopped. So if you want to do something meaningful, if you want to build something that lasts, expect failure. Accept it, but don't let it define you. Let your response to it be what sets you apart, because the world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more people willing to keep going,